Good afternoon. My name is Vanessa, and I will be your conference operator today. At the time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Beyond Banquet Recognition Strategies that Support Volunteers and Organizations webinar. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number one on your telephone keypad. If you want to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. We will now like to turn the call over to Ms. Shannon McGarry. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Beyond Banquets, Recognition Strategies that Support Volunteers and Organizations. Today's webinar is one in a series of monthly webinars that's designed to provide tips and offer assistance that will help you guide through your VISTA service year. Today's webinar will give you some insights into how you can build a volunteer recognition program that will help you to garner support and maximize your year. Joining us today, two speakers who will review some strategies and best practices for recognizing volunteers. And then they'll also walk us through the VISTA campus that will show you some useful tools that you can access whenever you need during your service. So joining us today, we have Andy King, who's a training specialist with AmeriCorps Vista, Jill Freeman, who's a training and online curriculum developer for Education Northwest, Danielle Ricks is offering technical assistance and support. You will see her in chat feature as Suzanne Knisner, and myself, Shannon McGarry, also with campaign consultation. Dale, I'm going to turn it over to you to offer some tips for using WebEx.
Great. Thank you so much, Shen. To everyone, if you lose your internet connection, please reconnect using the link that was emailed to you. If you lose your phone connection, please dial 1-877-297-9359. This session is being recorded and will be available on the VISTA campus along with the archives of previous webinars. You can use the chat window at the right to ask questions. However, if you're speaking to everyone, please click on the drop-down menu and indicate that you are sending that to everyone. I'm seeing some people saying hi from Texas to me privately, and I think you want to say that to everyone. And if you are not able to get the code, I'm going to put that in the chat in a minute so that you can be able to hear the audio portion of this. And I'm turning it back over to Shannon.
Great. Thank you so much, Danielle. And if you could go ahead, we have a poll that we're going to open up here momentarily, so it'll show up on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can go ahead and take a few minutes to fill that out for us, this will help whether or not you are working with volunteers or plan to work with volunteers during your service year. I wanted to take a few moments to go over today's agenda. We're going to do the welcome introductions, which is what we're doing now, and then we'll spend a few moments go over the 8 rules and 3 levels of recognition. Then we'll move on to the benefits of a volunteer recognition program, followed by recognition strategies for your site. And then we'll move on to the VISTA campus so that we can learn how to navigate some of the tips and the resources that will be most useful for you. And that will be followed by some next steps, so that you can begin to engage and take action right away. And then we'll do a quick evaluation so that we can improve the webinars that we deliver in the future. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Andy, who is our VISTA training specialist, to give us a warm welcome.
Thank you, Shannon, and hello, everyone. As Shannon said, my name is Andy King, and I work in the VISTA training unit at VISTA headquarters. And one of my roles is to develop trainings like this one, as well as to work on developing the PSO curriculum, and then also to build the content that you'll find on the VISTA campus. I want to thank you for joining us today. We see this as an investment in your professional development, and we look at the VISTA year as one of continuous development and capacity building for the community through the work that you do. Also a year of building your own skills and your own capacity. And participating in trainings like this is a great way for you to do that and to continue towards your own capacity. Glad you've made time in what I'm sure is a very busy schedule to join us today. And now I'm going to turn us back to Shannon to get us started on the rest of the program.
Great. And it looks like we are still got a couple more minutes of the poll.
Yeah, just about 9 seconds.
About 9 seconds more. So we're just going to let that finish off. And while that's finishing, I'm going to take a moment and introduce our next speaker, who's Jill Freeman. And as I mentioned before, she's the Advisor Training and Online Curriculum Developer at Education Northwest. She's located in Portland, Oregon. And Jill teaches many of the Vista Blend courses, including the one on working with volunteers and volunteer recognition. And so, Jill, I'm going to turn it over to you in a moment after I ask Danielle to share with us some of the poll results.
So for the first question, does your Vista site have an organized volunteer program? It looks like the majority of you have said yes, followed by a resounding no. And so this should be a great webinar for you. And then the second question, does your Vista site have a formal volunteer recognition program? It looks like that's a repeat of the first one. So let's go to no. Well, the third question, is your volunteer recognition part of your VED? And it looks like that's split down the middle evenly, 50-50. And then we're hoping in this webinar we'll be able to get to where you are in your Vista service year. From that, it looks like many of you are in the 1 to 3 month range, followed by the 10 to 12 month range.
Great, Danielle. So Jill, we're going to turn it over to you to walk us through what volunteer recognition program is and how the Vistas in the field can implement one in their programs.
And Jill, before I turn the clicker over to you, I'm going to save this poll. That's only going to just take me a couple of seconds. So you'll see the ball being passed to you in just a moment.
Wonderful. Shannon. Thanks for joining us today. Like Shannon said, my name is Jill Freeman, and I'm a curriculum developer at Education Northwest, and I also teach a lot of the Vista Blend courses. What we're talking about today is volunteer recognition, and many of you have reported that you don't necessarily have a formal volunteer recognition program, so we're hoping that you'll find a lot of use out of today's webinar. Let's start it by first getting a working definition of what we mean when we say volunteer recognition program. Volunteer recognition program is a structured and institutionalized system to fully and informally acknowledge and honor volunteer participation, service, and/or accomplishments. Many organizations recognize volunteers in informal ways, but successful volunteer programs tend to have a structured process for recognizing and honoring their volunteers. In other words, recognition is not an afterthought or dependent on individual staff members. It's an inner part of a functional volunteer program, much in the way that recruitment and screening processes are formalized and structured inside of organizations. Today we're actually use this definition as kind of a framework for this webinar, and we're going to explore each of the bolded words you see up there as we go through the content today.
And you have control.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
So, in a working understanding of what we mean by volunteer recognition program, we need to consider the guidelines for establishing such a program. Volunteer management experts Steve McCurley and Rick Lynch describe some best practices, or as they call it, the rules of recognition, in the Volunteer Management Handbook. Following 8 guidelines will ensure that you're setting up your volunteer program to be a part of your organizational practices and operations. In other words, you're instituting this program, like we talked about in the previous definition. First of all, the first rule is give it frequently. And when we're talking about giving it frequently, we mean to give recognition as often as you can. Number one complaint for volunteers is that they feel like they don't get enough recognition for what they do from staff. 1 year is not enough. You need to make sure that you're giving recognition almost as frequently as your volunteers are giving their service. Second of all, you want to give honestly. Don't give feedback unless you mean it, and don't give recognition unless you mean it. Then it's insincere and undervalued by your staff. It just seems trite and undervalued. So make sure that you're giving feedback and recognition in honest ways.
You want to give recognition using a variety of methods. We're going to discuss this more in depth later in the webinar, but using any different recognition strategies keeps it from getting stale and will appeal to different volunteer motivation styles. Every volunteer is the same, and so recognition isn't going to be received in the same way. You're using lots of different styles so that lots of different people feel recognized in the ways they prefer. You're giving recognition to the person, not just the work. This is a somewhat important difference. Remember that people do the work. It doesn't just magically appear. So you want to make sure that they're the ones who should get the credit for it. Talk how great a program is without recognizing the people who actually worked to put that program together makes your organization seem like they don't value the work that volunteers do. You want to give recognition appropriately to the achievement. Small achievements should be praised with low effort methods. The perception should be that when you do something, you're rewarded or recognized appropriately for the work that you've put out. 6, make sure that you're giving recognition consistently. Make it consistent amongst volunteers to avoid the perception of favoritism or people not being liked as much as other people. You want to give it in a timely way, as soon as possible. Otherwise, people are often going to forget what they've done to even deserve the recognition, or you run the risk of having volunteers feel like no one was paying attention. You have recognition for what you want more of. Volunteers often get attention for poor performance. Make sure your organization that they're more likely to get recognition for good performance. Encourage that good performance by recognizing good work efforts. Use it as a modeling tool for other volunteers who will be watching to see how other people are being recognized. Using rules as a framework for institutionalizing your program. The next step is to structure your program. You ensure that your volunteer recognition program is organized, functional, and employs appropriate methods of recognition. There are really 3 levels where volunteer recognition should occur. First of all, there's the individual level, the organizational level, and finally the community level. The individual level is where the recognition should occur most frequently. It's a foundational piece. And the other 2 levels, organizational and community, will happen less frequently, often are more visible or prominent publicly. Each of these levels, there are 4 methods your organization can use to recognize your volunteers. Acknowledgements, rewards, events, otherwise known as the acronym CARE. These are the 4 ways in which you'll see volunteers recognized frequently in organizations. We're going to talk about each one of these at each level. Let's look at the individual level. Here's CARE at the individual level. At the level, your organization is acknowledging and recognizing the volunteer in a personal context. Thank you in person through a note is a common way organizations communicate their appreciation. It's expensive and it goes a really long way with volunteers. With volunteer at the individual level, tokens such as plaques, certificates of appreciation or recognition are often used. These are ways in which you say thank you by acknowledging their contributions in a more permanent, tangible way. Rewarded with gifts or perks on behalf of the organization. An example of this might be access to organizational events or promotion inside of the organization to a leadership role or a mentoring role. This is definitely considered a recognition strategy, and often people don't think of it in that way. And you can recognize volunteers through individual events or occasions such as birthday lunches, personal chats over coffee, feedback or training sessions for the volunteer. This can often speak to the common volunteer motivations of personal development and professional development. So making sure that you have individual moments with your volunteers to really praise their efforts, understand why they're there so that you can meet their motivational needs can be really useful at this individual level. Professional level, volunteers are recognized amongst the staff, clients, and other volunteers of your site. Organizations have a volunteer corner in their newsletter or a volunteer page on their website where other members of the organization can learn about accomplishments of an individual or group of volunteers. This is one of the key communication strategies. Promote your volunteers publicly inside of the organization so that others can start to recognize them as well. When ignoring volunteers at the organizational level, awards for service are often used. These can include longevity awards, volunteer of the month, year, or decade awards, or other honors that are only available to those inside of your organization. Volunteers are rewarded with member benefits. For example, volunteers might be able to join a credit union or a gym that's affiliated with your organization, or perhaps you're eligible for discounts at local merchants. Working with local partners to set up volunteer perks programs is an inexpensive way to reward volunteers and a great way to build partnerships in your community. Regular recognition events is a party or banquet where volunteers are honored. While that happens at fundraising events, it's important that you also have a volunteer-only event where the sole purpose is to celebrate your hardworking and dedicated volunteers and where they can celebrate each other. At the community level is a way to publicly celebrate and honor the work of your volunteers. Using places, news stories, or social media to bring public attention to an individual or group of volunteers, inform others, and result in a wave of accolades from community members. Moreover, this kind of appreciation can provide publicity for your organization's efforts. In addition to awards within inside of your organization, there are many local and national awards for service. Check with local service groups like the Rotary or the Lodges, foundations and national organizations. CNCS is one, Points of Light is another. It's an organizational habit to nominate your star volunteers. This will not bring lots of accolades to your own volunteers, but it'll also bring attention to your group. Supporting volunteers by asking them to represent your organization at community events, award ceremonies, and networking opportunities allows volunteers to connect and network, and it can be a source of pride for them. The organization can recognize volunteers through community events such as conferences, community fairs or festivals, and conventions. Developing these recognition strategies where acknowledgement and recognition become built into the culture of volunteer program in larger organizations can benefit more than just your volunteers. Be a structured part of your volunteer program. Working through this framework to create a volunteer recognition program can take some time and effort. It has to be established and maintained, both which can cost money and a lot of man hours. It's useful to understand what time and effort will bring. What are the benefits to your program? There are really three areas that will benefit from a robust volunteer recognition program. It benefits volunteers, it benefits organization, and it benefits your recipients of service or your clients. Why volunteer recognition program? First off, let's look at how it benefits volunteers. Volunteers benefit in a lot of ways. First of all, it provides them with a sense of personal satisfaction. It gives them something they can look at and know that they've accomplished, a real impact statement for themselves to take forward in their lives. It can also provide greater motivation. Volunteers who feel appreciated and recognized are more likely to put more into your organization. It provides them with a reason to keep going because it tells them that their work is valued. It also gives them a great sense of connection to the organization. There's a theory called reciprocity, which means when you give someone something, they feel more inclined to give something back to you. So as you give recognition to your volunteers, you're building a relationship with them, and they're more likely to continue volunteering for you and your organization. Of the contributions that they make. Oftentimes, volunteers will be selfless and not praise themselves or are too humble to acknowledge their own contributions to an organization. This often means that some people who are really well-meaning and well-deserving don't get the praise that they have coming their way. Giving them the opportunity to have an awareness of their contributions allows their staff and other volunteers to praise them and also can recognize just what sort of impact they've made in your organization. It can be of inspiration. Volunteers can strive to be recognized for longevity and quality of service. It gives them a reason to continue volunteering for your organization. And finally, the recognition program really provides personal and professional development for volunteers. Using strategies such as feedback sessions or opportunities to attend conferences, this can provide your volunteers with growth opportunities, which can also speak to the multiple motivations that volunteers have coming into organizations. Next, let's look at the benefits to an organization. A good volunteer recognition program makes volunteers more likely to stick around. Volunteers, as we know, are a really crucial resource for most nonprofit and government organizations. They need them in order to run effectively. It costs a lot less for organizations to keep good volunteers than to continue to train, interview, and screen new volunteers. So being able to retain those that you have that are good workers and good points of service for you is crucial. A good volunteer recognition program will increase your volunteer retention abilities. It provides inspired and motivated volunteers. Good volunteers are worth their weight in gold, so you want to keep them around. Making sure they have the inspiration and motivation to continue showing up is an important part of retaining good volunteers. It is a benchmark for excellence. When you guys people's good behaviors or good efforts or good work, what you're doing is telling other folks, this is what it looks like to succeed in this organization. You're giving people a yardstick to measure their own performance by. It allows you to record milestones and histories. Many of you have walked into organizations and seen the plaques on the wall with people's names for service honors or awards. That's a way of cataloging and archiving an organization's history. This is a great way to start to celebrate the historical benefits or historical successes of your organization. Provide an opportunity to have publicity for your organization and that your organization is working toward. Put together a press release talking about a great new program that volunteers helped to build, and it gets picked up in the local paper, then it becomes a point of discussion in the larger community. The community becomes aware of your issue and how great your volunteer program is, and they're more likely to support you in the public arena. It also funding. If you've ever filled out a grant application or done an RFP, they will often ask you for what staffing looks like and how many volunteers you have. Being able to show how your volunteer program is effective, that you have high rates of retention, and a really good pool of inspired and motivated volunteers means someone is more likely to fund you because you're a more stable organization. Volunteer recruitment. If you're able to say to a volunteer who's interested in volunteering for your organization that you have a formal recognition program, it lets them know that there's a reward system in place and that their volunteering their time will not just be a personal benefit to them, but also will be honored and recognized in a larger arena. Finally, let's look at how it benefits the recipients of service or your client base. A crucial part of a volunteer recognition program, and oftentimes it's an overlooked part of one of the benefits. After all, people most of the time are volunteering for an issue they really care about, which is connected to a group of people who benefit from a change in that issue. So, knowing volunteer recognition can help the recipients of service strengthen your organization. First of all, it provides increased awareness. What we mean here is that people are more aware and more likely to understand what volunteers actually do in the organization. It's an effective volunteer program obviously benefits your recipients of service. The more active your volunteers are, the smoother the program runs, the more likely the recipients of service or client base are to benefit from that program. Dedicated volunteer base. Consistency can be key, especially when dealing in human services. So you want to ensure that your volunteer base is made up of folks who are showing up and happy to be there. A volunteer recognition program can contribute to this. It's better service. Again, more consistent volunteers, training and turnover. People are more likely to get great customer service, and people who really understand the organization and have a long-term commitment to it. Recipients of service, an opportunity to show appreciation. It's not just showing appreciation for the community or the organization, but oftentimes something as simple as a thank you note or an opportunity to write a thank you note can give your recipients of service an opportunity to show their appreciation for the volunteer, which lets them feel like they're contributing back. Perception of a greater value of service. The key here is that when people see how much effort is being put out for a certain organization or towards an issue, that much effort is volunteered, that it's not paid, it increases the perception that the service is worth more. If people are willing to volunteer their time and do it well, are happy and treated well as volunteers, it makes the service seem like it's worth all that much more. This is key in making the recipients of service beneficiary of a good volunteer recognition program. So your own VISTA site, it's important to look at what we've covered in this webinar today to create a successful volunteer recognition program. First, those 8 rules that we talked about at the beginning. You want to know that everything you're doing is in line with those 8 rules when it comes to volunteer recognition, that you're providing some level of consistency, that you're giving opportunities for feedback to be timely, that you're doing it toward people, not just work efforts. Review those 8 rules, and when establishing your own program, ensure that there are opportunities for those rules to be met. Second, you want to make sure that you're providing recognition opportunities at all 3 levels. You'll be able to go back over these slides once the webinar is posted and look at some of the strategies that we suggested at each level. Remember those 4 methods, the key methods, they appear at each level, will give you a variety of methods to recognize volunteers, a variety of methods for your volunteers to feel like they are more motivated and connected to your organization. And it'll also provide your organization with secondary benefits, like publicity, public knowledge, increased awareness for your issue. So it is a win-win for everyone. To understand those benefits that we just talked about at all 3 different levels, the benefits for the organization, the volunteer, and the recipients of service. This is important not just so you understand why you're providing volunteer recognition, but also gives you talking points internally inside of the organization. Sometimes volunteer recognition, saying thank you, is the first thing to go. It's not as crucial, or people don't perceive it as crucial, as other programming needs that are more urgent. Because it can be really easy to forget to say thank you or to forget to formalize those recognition strategies. If you can talk about those benefits, show how they really will increase your retention, how increase your publicity, how they'll provide you with a stable and steady and happy volunteer base, you're able to talk about them in ways that make a volunteer recognition program institutionalized and valued in your organization. We have a little worksheet for you that you're getting after the webinar today. It'll be emailed to you either today or tomorrow. The first that you see here has what we talked about. It's basically a summary of today's webinar with the 8 rules of recognition, the 3 levels of recognition, the 4 methods, the CARE model, and the 3 beneficiaries of recognition. On the back side of the worksheet, you'll see this grid, this planning document for you and your organization. It'll allow you to start to structure out a recognition program. So a category on the far left, it talks about the level that the recognition should take place. Within each level, you'll see the 4 methods, the communication, the acknowledgement, the rewards, and the events methods. And then space there to actually identify some key methods that you'll use in those 4 contexts. You'll then talk how frequently that type of recognition should occur. Is it something that's daily? Maybe it's a saying thank you. It's a daily form of communication. Maybe something that you do weekly or monthly or bi-yearly, or maybe once a year, like a recognition banquet or a recognition event. List what resources you need to achieve that kind of recognition strategy. So if it's like writing thank you notes, you will provide actual stationery for folks to write thank you notes on. If it's something like an event, you'll want to do a more extensive planning, but you'll want to start on the sheet trying to figure out what resources are necessary. Will you need plaques, awards? Will you need a banquet hall? Will you need tables and chairs? Will you need extra volunteers? What sort of resources are available and needed? And then finally, you want to make sure that you're talking about the benefits. Again, benefits can be talking points internally inside of your organization, but they can also be the objectives you're trying to get by putting out this recognition program and this specific strategy. Doing that, it'll also help you match motivations. So if you have a volunteer that's just feeling generally underappreciated when they come in every day, you'll be able to look at the benefits that are there and decide which strategy best meets that objective, which strategy best meets that need of the volunteer to feel more recognized on a daily basis. We're hoping that this worksheet you'll find really helpful. It'll be something you can use to lead at your organization as part of your capacity building efforts. I think we'll open up the lines now for questions. Is that right?
That is right. I'm going to grab right back from you. Thank you very much, Jill. That was great information. And Vanessa, if we could open up the lines at this time, if anyone has any questions.
At this time, I would like to remind everyone, if you would like to ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. We will pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. First question comes from the line of Ian Anderson.
The organization does not have a volunteer program in place. I actually have to go through the process of developing the policies and procedures. Is there training on developing such material?
That's a great and a predicament that a lot of people are in. I find some information on the campus in the work section, which Andy's going to lead you through in a second, so I'm going to let him point out some of those resources. I would say that the other thing to do is probably find yourself a good book on volunteer management. The McCurley and Lynch book I referenced earlier I think is a good resource for folks, and we've had Vistas have successes with that in the past. Most importantly, when you're approaching that work, I want to encourage you to think about it in two ways. The first is strategy, and the second is systems. Strategy means that you're thinking through things and asking a lot of questions about long-term implications of your decisions. And with systems, what that really means is that you're building actual systems, like a screening system or an interviewing system or a marketing system, how you'll do them. It's the practice part of it. So you think about it in both ways.
Thank you. And what was that book again? Is that listed on this site?
The webinar, it's cited at one of the bottom of the slides, but it's Steve McCurley, McCurley, and Lynch, Lynch. That great book, and then also the campus resources. One campus resources Andy will be showing you is a specific reference list from the volunteer mobilization class that we teach. So I'll also give you some information.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions?
If you'd like to ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Your next question comes from the line of Cornelia Hudson.
So I'm with the organization called STAND. That's Schools Together Allowing No Drugs. And we also have a drug court here. And most of our volunteers are service quartered. Can we do that with them? Is that able to build? I mean, that's our volunteers.
I think it's crucial that you do that with them, and as long as you aren't violating any of the standards set out by the court, I would say that organizationally it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, okay.
Just because someone starts as a community service,
I don't think they're doing that here, so I'm going to try to put that together.
And a lot of people can find value in those community services.
Oh, yeah.
And then look for sites to do.
They need recognition as much as anybody, as far as I'm
Absolutely.
concerned. Because they're doing this, a lot of their time. They're paying their debt to society, too. So, thank you so much. I'm going to try to use all this for that.
Great. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I mentioned really quickly before we take our next question that we're going to start a forum topic in the forum section of the campus under the work on volunteer recognition strategies. We want to invite you, if you have any strategies that you've seen used, you've used yourself that have been successful, that fall along any of those 3 levels or use any of those 4 methods we talked about today, that you go ahead and post them. Share them with your VISTA community. What we know is that VISTA really get a lot out of those forums and that you are the most crucial forms of information and resources to each other. And so participating in the forum is a great way that you can give back to the VISTA community, but also a great way for you to get ideas about recognition strategies.
Your next question comes from the line of Janaris.
Hi. I have no formal volunteer recognition program as of yet, and I put a question on the chat, and I'm getting a lot of feedback, but I wanted to get your feedback as well. How do you recommend we go about funding these types of things?
That's a great question. I think there are a lot of low-cost ways to recognize volunteers. Again, saying thank you goes a really long way with people and costs virtually nothing. I think the other thing you can do is that sometimes people can receive some grant funding to provide volunteer recognition programs or strategies. I think it's also a good funding technique for folks. They can use it as a fundraising point that some of the funds raised by people will help support volunteer programs. And like I said before, I think going through your community partnerships can be really beneficial. I know that one of the organizations I volunteer with has a partnership with one of the movie theaters in town and gets movie tickets that they then give to volunteers as a way to recognize and thank them for their service. There's an ice cream parlor in town that they also do that with. So I think really working those partnerships, it can have dual benefit. One, it provides you with sometimes products or goods for recognition, and two, it builds a partnership and creates more continuity in your community and knowledge of your service and your volunteers and what your organization does. So I'd start there.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
If you'd like to ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Your next question comes from the line of Raquel Bliss.
Hi, I was looking at your grid that was one of your last slides on your PowerPoint.
Yes.
And you're supposed to association at the organizational, community, and the individual levels, right? And you do that through communication, acknowledgement, rewards, and events. Now, does that mean on that grid that you probably should be able to fill in all the little lanes, because that's a lot of appreciation for...
It's a lot of appreciation, and it doesn't have to happen simultaneously. But if you think about it, there are 3 levels and 4 methods, so that's kind of 12 if my math is correct. I'm not great at last time I checked that was 12. And over 365 days in a year, if that you were to look at that as an annual plan, that doesn't go very far. And we talked about before, not every volunteer is going to receive every form of recognition you have to offer.
Right.
It's about matching it with what the volunteer needs, what sort of accomplishments they have, those low effort versus high effort accomplishments. And then also making sure that there's a variety of methods. You know, volunteers appreciate those thank you notes, but if all they get is a thank you note over a couple of years, that can get old and tired. So you want to make sure you have multiple things that you have in your arsenal. It's kind of like building a toolkit. You aren't going to use all the tools at once, but you want to have them there for when you need them.
For an individual level, you want to do it. Do you do an event for an individual?
So
maybe notify them or let them say happy birthday or something on their birthday, or is that an example of an event or what?
It is. An event is sort of just an honoring of a specific day or some sort of outing for a volunteer or something outside of the organization. So, yeah, oftentimes birthday lunches are done, or sending them to an individual training, with their community. That can be an example of an event. So it's something that is taking place outside of the organization for the volunteer.
Okay, well, thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
If you'd like to ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad.
In the interest of time, I think what we'll do is we'll close the lines now, but if people have additional questions at the end, we can open the lines back up. We want to make sure that we get to everybody's questions, but I also want to make sure we have enough time to take a look at the campus as well. So at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Andy, who's going to share his desktop and walk us through the Vista campus.
Okay, you have rights now.
Great. Thank you, and thanks, Jill, for that terrific framework for looking at volunteer recognition. I think it gives a lot of different ways to think about how the efforts we're already doing, might fit into some of these different levels and different methods, and then it might also show us we might have new opportunities where things aren't being done. So, just to remind everybody that the summary page and the grid that Jodis will be emailed out to you, so you'll have that as a reference. So it includes a citation from the McCurley Lynch book, so you'll have the title and the details on that publication as well. What now is just walk you through one section of the Vista campus and show you a few of the resources that are there that relate to the topic of volunteer recognition. So of course, when you come to the campus, you enter into the Vista area, and then in the major categories, we're going to go into the work. And the little bookshelf here, or little cubbies, the one in the far upper left is working with volunteers. So that's where we're going to focus now. And if you've been to this area, you know that it's divided into 4 major different sections. One is on planning your volunteer program, here on recruiting volunteers. The third one on managing volunteers and managing your volunteer program. And then the fourth one is a link to the online course, the Vista Blend course, Volunteer Mobilization, that Jill is the instructor for. So let's start here in the planning area, and I want to just point out a few resources that you might find helpful. The first here is using volunteers for project planning. Really going to take a look at this one, but it helps to show you one way that you could engage volunteers, recognize them, is actually to promote them into a project planning or an advisory role kind of position. So if you have volunteers that are experienced, then one of the ways you can recognize them is through promotion and giving them new duties or different duties, and calling their skill and experience to help planning what's coming up for your organization or for the volunteer program itself. It's an interactive course there. We're not going to go through it because it's only tangentially related to recognition. The second one here is also related to that, utilizing volunteers as project leaders. And again, promotion is a great way to recognize and acknowledge the skill and experience of your volunteers, and to them not feel really good about what they've done in the past, but to give them some new and more interesting challenges. Because I think all of us, after a while, of doing the same activities again and again, so it can be a really great way to re-energize and motivate more experienced volunteers by giving them new opportunities and new challenges, and promoting them to become a volunteer leader is a great way to do that. This interactive course here focus on that specifically and give them ideas. It's taking a little while to load here through the WebEx, but it will give you some of what you might want to consider in terms of developing, determining what your leadership needs are, and then build out those leadership roles for your volunteers. And it outlines a process by which you can recruit and select your project leaders, volunteer leaders from your existing experienced volunteers, and how to orient, train, give responsibilities, and manage them through that work. So that's this course on utilizing volunteers as project leaders. So I'm going to now to the overall section on planning. There was a question that came in on the chat early on. Someone had a question about being responsible for planning a volunteer recognition event. So there's another, this one is an animated course here called The Keys to Success, Everything Events. So it focuses on plan effective events, and it focuses on 4 areas, and they're outlined here as 4 keys to success. So the one is really to identify what is the goal of your event. It's framed here in terms of a community problem because the general way that this course is used is for community events. But if you're going to do a volunteer event, you would rephrase that instead of a community problem. It's what we really want to accomplish. What do we want to get out of holding this event? So you would talk about things like appreciate your volunteers. You want to build social capital with them. You want to foster relationships among your volunteers and energize and motivate them. So the first key is really to clearly identify the goal of having your event. The second key is to identify who the audiences will be. And a volunteer recognition event, clearly that would be your volunteers. But some other key audiences that you'll want to include as well. Could be local elected officials, city council members, or a mayor, or a county alderman. Get them involved because they will then see the value that your volunteers are providing and really see the value of your overall program and the benefits it's providing to the community. Once you have a sense of who your audiences are and what it is you hope to accomplish, then you can really hone in on choosing the right event. Is it going to be a formal gala type thing with, formal attire and a sit-down dinner? Is it a picnic or an ice cream social? Is it going to be an entertainment event like getting tickets to a local play or other, entertainment production? So there are lots of different types of events that you can use very effectively to thank and recognize your volunteers. But the right event is going to depend on who your volunteers are and who the other audiences are and what it is you want to accomplish. The fourth key here, the fourth area to focus on is really a toolkit that provides you with very specific action steps and then some tools, templates that you can use in planning your event. So that's this a quick look at this resource called Everything Events. And I'm going to just jump back now to the planning section. I'll take a look at one more resource here. So I'll go down and want to point here. These resources are from the Volunteer Mobilization and Development course that is part of the Blended Learning course that Jill Freeman is the instructor for. It's a 3-week online course for which you can earn college credit. And we'll be offering that again soon. And I think within the next month or so, the dates and the enrollment information for that course will be available on the campus. And we'll be posting an announcement in the announcement forum, so you'll all know about it. But these are some of the resources that have been sort of broken down from that course and offered here as individual standalone documents. And move all the way down to the managing section. And you can see here is a brief PDF document on volunteer recognition practices. So it will support a lot of what we've heard today in the presentation and gives, again, some more specific examples of the types of volunteer practices that you use for individual recognition or recognition at the organizational level, some things around communication, acknowledgments, rewards, and events. It's a quick read. It's kind of a bullet list to spur your thinking and help give you some ideas about some directions you could take. But of course, again, if you want more in-depth information, there is a whole course here on volunteer management that I'm going to show you in just a second. And then there are many really very fine books around the subject. So now to the Working with Volunteers section, and in now the Managing area is the Volunteer Management course that I mentioned to you. And again, the MEC course, it takes a minute to load here on the WebEx. It covers not only volunteer recognition, but really all the major aspects of creating and managing an effective volunteer program. So it starts with recruiting and scheduling, retaining. There's a section here on recognizing. So this is where I sort of have my my campus here. So there's just a few pages of content and information. Give you the background on why recognize and some of the ways in which to go about recognizing. So the course on volunteer management. And also to point out to you that in this same section are the resources from PSO, back when you attended PSO, and for some of you that was maybe within the last few weeks, and for others several months ago. Many of the PSO resources we've been posted here on the campus, so if you don't have it handy, you can always get back to them here. Now, last thing I want to point out to you is the forum. And Jill, that just after this session concludes, Jill is going to post a message on the VISTA forum, and it's in the one that's called You and the Work. So if you haven't gone to our forums yet, you go to the Connect with Vistas section of the campus. You'll see here the VISTA forums, the widget on the upper right, and to get the full list, you click this tab that says All Forums, and then check out the complete list of VISTA forums, because they won't fit a tiny little window. So here's the whole list, and the one we're going to look at is called You and the Work. So this is the forum. Jill hasn't posted her message yet, but I'm guessing in the next 30 or so she will post a message here, and she's going to invite you and invite really all users on the campus to post ideas for successful recognition strategies, or if you have tips or ideas for things that you've seen used that are really effective or inexpensive, or have questions about, gosh, how can I go about putting together something for volunteers that won't cost a lot of money. So forums really are intended to be a dynamic combination of you and Vistas serving all over the country. So Jill's going to get the thread started, but we really will count on you to conversation going and to contribute your ideas. And if you've not yet posted on any of the forums, when you open the message and click reply, a window will open where you can type in your message. And at the bottom is a little checkbox that says, notify me when posts are added. If you check the box, then you'll get an email into your email inbox. So you won't have to continue going back to forum to see if anybody else has posted. You'll see the conversation come into your inbox. All right, so I'm going to close out of the forum here, and that's it for our campus tour. So I'm going to turn you back over to Shannon, and she's going to walk us through some next steps. So I'm going to give the control back to her as soon as she's got it back.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. And so if you noticed in the chat, I've posted links to You and the Work forum. So feel free to join that conversation once the discussion has been posted, and share your ideas for volunteer recognition so that others can learn from your best practices, and it'll be a great place for you to go and figure out what to do.
Shannon, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've posted it in the forum, and the worksheet is there as well, so it's ready for folks.
Oh, great. So wonderful. So if you click on that link, you will be able to participate in that discussion after today's webinar, and also get the form. You notice there's also an evaluation poll that just opened. So if you can go ahead and start filling that out, that'll give us ideas on how we can improve our webinars in the future. And I also wanted to suggest 4 things that you can go and do right now on the campus. One of those is to bookmark the most important volunteer resources on the Vista campus, so the things that you think are going to be the most useful to you. And then to continue the conversation on the campus forum, which is under the work session. So as we just talked about, Jill has kindly posted a discussion to get conversations started around volunteer recognition programs. So again, I want to encourage everyone to go on and share their ideas and engage in that conversation. And then Andy pointed out a few really good courses that might be useful to manage and plan events, working with volunteers section of the campus. So definitely jump on those and take a few of those courses, because they will be, you might find them to be highly beneficial to you. And finally, there were a lot of questions about upcoming webinars and where you can find information on fundraising and resource development. So I want to encourage everybody to take a look at the campus calendar to find some events and future training opportunities. The next webinar is actually a webinar networking in your community that will be offered on Wednesday, September 19th. And so you can actually go to the calendar and register for that webinar, and we hope to see you there as well. So thank you again for your participation, and thank you to our speakers for bringing us with some very helpful and insightful resources and ideas about working with volunteers and building a recognition program for them and taking us through the campus. So again, we'll go ahead and if it has, just that you're filling out the evaluation. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact us at vistacampus@campaignconsultation.com, and we will certainly answer those.
Actually, we do have a question in queue.
Oh, okay, great. We can go ahead and take that.
We have a follow-up question from the line of Shaw Anderson.
Thank you. My question was, if I think some other people may have had this same question as well, but it was in regards to funding. Now, this is a new program as a VISTA for the Virginia Wounded Warrior Program. That's who I work with. And in creating this volunteer program, there isn't any funding allocated where I can do events. So I'm going to have to really get creative in recognizing staff or volunteers that I have participate in the organization. Do you have any creative ideas?
Sure. What we talked about earlier was that partnership element, which I think can be really useful, especially for new programs like yours, in terms of letting folks know who you are in the community and what you're doing. So trying to figure out, what are the types of things in our community that our volunteers are interested in doing? Is there an art museum?
Right.
So can you work with that art museum to get membership for your volunteers? Or we talked about the movie tickets earlier as an example. So I think really building those partnerships is key and crucial, and considering that to be part of your resource development work that you're doing as building a volunteer program. I think the other thing is allowing volunteers to recognize each other with small tokens that might not cost much money, those thank you notes, and giving people the opportunity to write those thank you notes. Those can all be local ways. I want to invite folks to use that forum to talk about other low-cost ways they may have to recognize volunteers, because I think this is a common predicament that a lot of you are facing in your organizations is the lack of funding. So I think that forum space will be a good place to explore this. And do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
I would say to echo what Jill has said, to really look into the community, because in my experience I have found that so many businesses are really very happy to support your work through that way, and it's often a very easy thing for them to do. You also, as a VISTA, you want to look long term, and you want to think about what is going to be sustainable, and after your service year ends. So as Jill suggested, developing resources and doing some fundraising to help support your volunteer program and recognition being an integral part of that, I think could be something that you might want to consider adding to your work plan. It can certainly talk about how that fits in to the other pieces of your VAD, but I think understanding what it is that you expect to get out of the recognition program, the benefits it will bring to the program, to the volunteers, to the people you're serving, will make that the pitch for resources a lot easier to make, so you can build the case a lot more easily.
And can you please one more time tell us what the new date is for September?
So the Networking in Your Community webinar will be offered on Wednesday, September 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern.
At 2 p.m., right, great, thank you.
2 p.m.
I think just to follow up on what Andy said, I think also look internally inside of your organizations as to what resources you have available. As parking space that you can mark as the volunteer of the month or the volunteer of the year, volunteer of the century parking space. Things that won't cost your organization any money but do provide a visible public recognition of volunteers. That will also be useful.
That was very helpful.
Thanks.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your participation today. We've really filled the hour and then some. I look forward to seeing our continued conversation on the VISTA Forum. And you can look to get some additional resources emailed to you following this call. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you next month or on another one of our webinars.